In this video, we will work with anchor points within Indesign CS6. The more you work within Indesign, the more comfortable and creative you will become. So most likely, you will find yourself needing to create a more complex shape than the shapes that were created in a previous video. You may also find yourself wondering how other shapes that fall outside of the rectangle, ellipse, or polygon shapes are created. Hopefully this tutorial will shed some light on those questions. In Indesign, as you draw, you create a line called a path, which is made up of one or more straight or curved segments. The beginning and end of each of these segments is called an anchor point. Moving these anchor points allows you to change the shape of a path and create whole new shapes altogether. For example, let's say you want to create a triangle shape in your document. Well, we've looked at the options in the past that we have for drawing a shape within Indesign. Where do we see a triangle option? The answer is that we don't. However, you can create a triangle fairly easily on your own. First, I'm going to draw a new rectangle in my document. I can do so by selecting the M key on my keyboard regardless of whether I'm using a PC or Mac. Then, I'll go ahead and draw the rectangle. If you recall from our tool panel discussion in Chapter 2, the Direct Selection tool allows you to select an object or points on a path, which is what we'll do now. To activate the Direct Selection tool, type A on your keyboard on a PC or Mac. With the Direct Selection tool activated, I'm going to hover my cursor over the anchor point on the upper left-hand corner of the shape. Next, I'm going to left-click on the anchor point and start to drag down. Notice that I'm changing the paths of the shape by moving this anchor point. I'm going to keep moving until my Smart Guide displays to indicate that I have created a perfect diagonal line between the two anchor points in opposite corners of the original rectangle. When I let go of my left mouse button, notice that I have created a triangle shape. I'd also like to point out that you can select more than one anchor point at a time to move by selecting the first anchor point, holding the Shift button on your keyboard, and then selecting the rest of the anchor points. Although this was a basic example of how to edit shapes with anchor points, hopefully it gives you an idea of how to get started. As we work with other drawing tools, this understanding of how anchor points will be crucial. Adding anchor points can give you more control over a path, or it can extend an open path. However, it's a good idea not to add more points than necessary. A path with fewer points is easier to edit, display, and print. By default, the Pen tool changes to the Add Anchor Point tool as you position it over a selected path, or the Delete Anchor Point tool as you position it over an anchor point. However, if you wanted to select the Add Path tool manually, you could either select the equal sign on a keyboard, or you could select the Add Anchor Point tool from the tool panel. So let's say that the anchor points on my triangle aren't getting the job done that I want them to do. I'm going to select the Add Anchor Point tool and move my cursor to the shape. On the bottom border of the shape, I'm going to left-click my mouse button, and notice now that an additional anchor point has been added. Now I'm going to type A on my keyboard to select the Direct Selection tool, and I'm going to use this anchor point to change my shape again. Notice how adding an anchor point can allow you to have flexibility when creating a new shape. If you find that you do not need an anchor point, activate the Delete Anchor Point tool by selecting the minus sign on the keyboard and left-clicking the anchor point in the shape. Notice now the anchor path that I created has been deleted and the path has changed back, so now we have a triangle shape again. Deleting unnecessary anchor points can reduce the complexity of the path. Paths can have two anchor points: corner points and smooth points. At a corner point, a path abruptly changes direction, as displayed in the rectangle and triangle shapes that we have created during this tutorial. At a smooth point, path segments are connected on a continuous curve. The Convert Direction Point tool allows you to change an anchor point from a corner point to a smooth point, or vice versa. I'm going to activate the Convert Direction Point tool by selecting Shift-C on a PC or a Mac, and then selecting one of my anchor points. Now that I've converted the anchor point, notice that I can curve the paths. Even though the anchor point stays in the same position, I've created yet another more complex shape by converting the anchor point to a smooth point. Although the shape that I have on the screen here is, of course, nowhere near perfect, notice that I have now begun the process of creating a heart shape within my document. When you think about the fact that this shape started out as a rectangle, it's pretty amazing that with a few steps, we've been able to completely transform the shape that we were originally working with. Using the Direct Selection tool, I could change this shape to look a little bit more like a heart, by pulling down the bottom path. Notice that by tweaking these anchor points, we can continue the transformation of our shape. This concludes our tutorial on working with anchor points. Although working with anchor points to create more than just a basic shape within InDesign can seem frustrating, the more you practice, the more comfortable you will become. Hopefully you will find yourself able to create more complex shapes in no time.